Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So I had closed down for tonight, but anytime something happens, I try to keep you guys apprised of some of the stories that I cover. One of these stories having to do with war, I tend to put an acute focus on, especially what's taking place in the Middle East, because I think it's an extraordinarily big deal. And there should be focus on it, because this can easily escalate into something larger than what it currently is. Right now, the newspapers are reporting that Iran has fired, or elements of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard supposedly fired 20 rockets into Golan Heights. Now, I've read the Washington Post version of this and a few other versions of this. This story, these guys are stenographers, even for outside the country. They're relaying this story from one party. They're literally taking all of the information from Israel. Yeah, they fired 20 rockets. Okay, how do you know that it was Iran that did this? Now, it is impossible that it was Syria that did this. Now, either way, Israel has responded by firing rockets into Syria, supposedly hitting Iranian targets. Sources have said that this wasn't Iran at all that fired these missiles. Sources said that this was Syria responding to Israeli aggression. Essentially, Israel fired, they responded in kind. It's hard to know what. We've seen that there were rockets being shot out of the sky, in both cases by Iron Dome, that's Israel's thing, and by the Syrian military essentially shooting out some rockets that's supposed to hit them out of the sky. Israel is attacking Syria, supposedly Iranian targets. Look, be extremely skeptical about what's taking place here. Israel is a proven liar, meaning the countries and the people who are in that country are proven liars. Benjamin Netanyahu, the head of that country, has been screaming that Iran is 3 years away from a nuclear bomb, going back all the way to 1992. He's a proven liar. He's the one who pushed forth this idea of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and that we'd be greeted as liberators in the country. He was a proven liar. If he's been a proven liar across the board, why on earth would all of a sudden we take what Israel is saying in this case as being true and accurate and being the actual word of what's taking place? Israel, Trump, and Saudi Arabia has assiduously tried to essentially come up with pretext and reason with which to attack Iran. They've been doing it by proxies in Syria, but they're looking for reasons to attack Iran. At the end of the day, I would be very skeptical about the news that's coming out in this regard, and I would look for other sources, meaning, what did Iran say about this? What did Syria say about this? And look, at least some of the sources that I've seen have said this wasn't Iran, that this was Syria that responded from Israeli aggression. So let's go through the article first, and I'm going to show you what I mean by the magnificent bias that's written in the article. Even going for the title. Iranian forces fire rockets at Israeli military in first direct attack ever, Israel's army says. Israel has said, they're going to attack us, they're going to attack us, they're going to, oh my God, they attacked us, they attacked us, they attacked us. They had 20 rockets. They had 20 rockets. They landed in fields and they didn't hit anybody. They had 20 rockets. That's what took place. All of this is from the perspective of Israel. That's the part I found amazing. They were stenographers from what Israel was telling them, and they just ran with it. They just ran with it. It's amazing. Israeli military said Iranian forces fired 20 rockets from inside Syria towards its position on the Golan Heights around midnight. Yeah, it's from the stolen position of the militarily occupied Golan Heights that doesn't belong to Israel around midnight Wednesday, as regional tensions escalated after the United States withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal. The rocket attack marked the first time that Iranian forces have ever fired directly on Israeli troops, according to Israeli military. You keep saying according to Israeli military, but everything here is talking about the Israeli military, and none of it gives me the perspective of saying, what is the other people saying about this? Even the name, Iran forces fire rocket at Israeli military. The majority of people only read the title. So you've just put into the public consciousness that Iran has fired on Israel when you don't necessarily know if that's completely true because you're only taking the word of Israel. Bias is fucking amazing. The Syrian state news agency reported that Israel had initially carried out strikes on targets near the Syrian town of Quetta, just east of the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. It said Syrian air defenses had responded. An Israeli military spokesman said the Iranian rockets were fired by the Quds Force, a special force unit affiliated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, and several of the rockets have been intercepted by Israel's missile defense system. No one was injured. All of this is problematic. Affiliated. What does that mean? What does that mean? Like, I guess what I'm getting at is the Washington Post has taken everything that the Israeli military has said and ran with it. It's almost as if you would have to ignore the fact that the person who's leading the country is a right-wing maniac. You would have to ignore the fact that that person has lied for 30 years. He's lied. He's made a career about lying. You would have to take the fact that that's the guy who was selling weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And you would have to take all of that into account when you're listening to what they're telling you for this from the standpoint of a person who's a journalist, and put caveats in this. All the way through this. This is what they say, but we don't necessarily know if it's true because it has not been confirmed by other sources. That's not what they say. That's not what they do. The Israeli military said it views this event with great severity and remains prepared for a wide variety of scenarios. Now, what's important here is, the reason why I say be very skeptical of this. Countries often try to find reasons or pretexts to go to war. The United States was willing to bomb a boat of Cubans in order to create a pretext to go into Cuba. The United States was willing to paint a flag on the side of a ship in order to come up with a pretext to attack Saddam Hussein. Weapons of mass destruction was the ultimate lie in order to get into Iraq. Humanitarian reasons was used by the Obama administration to go into Libya, and regime change, even though that was not what that was supposed to be from the standpoint of an international community's sake. Countries lie. Turkey shut down the internet when it was revealed on YouTube that they were talking about a false flag attack in Syria, using this idea of Al-Qaeda in order to come up with a reason to justify their actions. Countries lie. Countries come up with false flags. Countries come up with pretexts to do things. Hitler went across the border, sent troops across the border. I think this was Poland when he was annexing the countries, and had them say, hey, look, these guys attacked the German position. Now we need to respond. Be skeptical. That's all I'm saying. Is it possible that the people who attacked were Syrians? Yes, it's possible they were just Syrians. Is it possible that Israel is trying to create this pretext and feather their bed to some degree to try to create some kind of justifications for some larger action? Yes, that's also possible. Is it possible that there's been just a fight back and forth between Israel and Syrian forces? Yes, that's also possible. It's also possible. The Washington Post gives you none of that. Yeah, Washington Post gives you none of that. They pivot immediately to the Iran deal without necessarily engaging whether or not what they're telling them is true. You get the word from one government that's been a maniac, that's literally has an open-air ghetto apartheid state, and the open-air ghetto apartheid state government that has a military that was murdering protesters en masse, shooting them in the heads and the groin and the knees, and you're taking that military's word for what's taking place. That is nonsense. The idea, this is not objective. And what I mean by objective, you have to take into account that stuff. You have to take into account that these people actually want some kind of regime change in that part of the world. Anything that's coming from them must be taken with a certain amount of skepticism because the person who's coming from it has a biased disposition. You would have to be insane to not acknowledge the fact that they have a biased disposition. And how on earth can you report anything honestly that's coming out that side without necessarily denoting that these people are liars? These people are liars. This is another one. Iranian force launched missiles at Golan. Syrian says intercepted rockets launched by Israel. Essentially, they're firing missiles back and forth. This could be Syria. This doesn't necessarily have to be Iran. Israel could be using this, knowing that it's Syria, to try to, again, feather their nest for some kind of wider protest or some kind of wider pivot disposition towards Iran. Whatever Israel do in this case, Trump is going to follow suit, and Saudi Arabia is going to follow suit. Meaning, there's no reality to this in the real sense of political theater. Trump is in the bag for whatever Israel does. They're going to work in tandem. If Netanyahu came out and said, it's a green day, and I feel like whistling Dixie, Trump will come out and say, yes, I agree with him. It's a green day, and God damn it, I feel like whistling Dixie. The larger question becomes, what does Europe do? Because, and what I mean by that is, it's very clear that the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel are biased actors. Nothing that they're doing in this case is serious. Meaning, they're full of shit. That's what I'm getting across. EU, being a political force themselves, China and Russia, understands that the United States is full of shit. The United States only has 5% of the world's population. The overwhelming majority of the world is looking at the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel as rogue terrorist states. And as rogue terrorist, maniac, murderous states. A tiny fraction of the world, mind you. The rest of the world is saying, you guys are maniacs. You guys are a threat to world peace. And not just a threat to world peace, you're not being serious. Iran did nothing to break the deal. Iran was living up to the tenets of the deal. The person who didn't was the United States. The rest of the world knows that. The rest of the world is not necessarily going to back away from the fact of that. Meaning all of the other parties are trying to remain committed to the deal. The question becomes, what does Europe do? Israel right now is saber-rattling and trying to involve a larger conflict. It's literally escalating into something of a larger conflict. And is now screaming that, oh my God, they attacked territory that we stole from Syria for 50 years. Why are they screaming this? They're screaming this for the same reason that they've been screaming that Iran is a threat and everything else. They're trying to create this hysteria and some level of pretext around an attack for Iran. The problem is, this is not Iraq. Nobody's buying this. I mean, literally, Western forces or Western powers are literally in alignment with a country that you consider to be an enemy. China, Russia, all in alignment with countries that you consider to be an enemy. We are the ones that are isolated. And if you look around who we're with, whose side we're on, aren't your friends a reflection of who you are? My mom used to say your friends are a reflection of who you are. Saudi Arabia, murdering and starving Yemenis, literally weaponizing starvation, weaponizing illness in order to attack and destroy Yemenis. They have billions. They are one of extraordinarily rich. Yemen is one of the poorest countries, and yet they're so incompetent they still can't win that war. They've been using our assets. They've been using covert operations from the United States in order to attack that place. We've been assisting them in murdering and starving Yemenis. That's one of our friends. One of our other friends, Israel. Literally an open-air ghetto. A military policy where they're essentially an apartheid state, and they enshrine that level of apartheid state into law. They proceed stealing land despite it being against international law. And they continuously flout international law by keeping the Golan Heights and running operations into other countries whenever they feel like it. They flaunt it. They don't care. The United States protect them in the Security Council so they can do for the most part whatever they want. Those friends of ours last week or 2 weeks ago were shooting Palestinians in the head, peaceful protesters, shooting them in the head, in the knees, in the groin, even killing people who had press written on their chests. They were snipers, so they knew exactly where they were putting those shots. They were shooting into crowds of thousands. That's our other friend. The last group has to do with the terrorists who we've been paying in that region of the world, including ISIS. Israel has come out with devout support for ISIS. The United States has been doing it behind the scenes. Let's say doing it behind the scenes. These are our friends. These are the people we've been affiliating ourselves with, and have been affiliating ourselves with terrorists and warmongers and people who are essentially running an apartheid, open-air ghetto state. We've pushed the EU away, our Western allies and our Western partners. Our friends are a reflection of who we are, and right now that reflection is looking gross. Let's take a look at this last one. Let's see. One second. I didn't see anything on this, but maybe they responded. The story is still developing, so. All right. So here we go. So Israeli army attacks Iranian targets in Syria in retaliation for strikes in Golan Heights. This is kind of my point. We don't necessarily know if those strikes came from Iran at all. We do know that Israel wants reasons to attack inside Syria. We do know that they want ISIS to be able to kind of essentially run roughshod over the place. We do know that they prefer ISIS in that country because it allows them a free hand in which to construct a framework from which they can consistently attack who they consider to be an enemy, Iran. That's what we know. If you're in the media, the last thing you should do is take whatever Israel is saying as the word of God. Iranian forces launched missiles at Golan. Syria says intercepted rockets launched by Israel. Ultimately, what you're talking about here, though, is a firefight. If Iran did launch these missiles, this is what I predicted: an escalation. Here's the thing. Why wouldn't Iran launch missiles? Israel has been consistently attacking them. There's a piece in the Washington Post story that I want to put, and I'll leave it at that because I don't want this one to go too long. But on Tuesday, an airstrike widely attributed to Israel reportedly killed 8 Iranian soldiers after Israel said it had detected unusual Iranian troop movements across the border and had intelligence about a possible attack on Syrian soil. Again, all of this is from Israel, which, if you're being an honest journalist, you have no reason to trust. Why are you trusting these people? I don't understand it. Why on earth would you take something that the military of this country telling you is being factual and true when this is the same military that's been out there murdering Palestinians? That is an amazing thing. It's almost as if you would have to completely pretend that there is no such thing as geopolitical politics, that these countries have nothing that they actually want, that there aren't larger goals that the people who are in these countries are pushing for, such as a conflict with Iran. When you write these stories, it's almost as if you have to completely ignore all of the actual contextual data that's associated with it for you to write some of these things. This is fucking amazing bias. You're taking everything that they're saying as if it's true, when there's no reason to believe that it's true. That's my issue here. It's the Washington Post. This is what people are reading. Iran threatened to retaliate against Israel after a missile strike in April that killed 7 Iranian soldiers on a base. Let's see. All right, I don't see it. But ultimately, what it said, the reason why this is such a big deal if it's true, is because this is the first time that Iran has attacked installations of Israel. Mind you, Israel attacks installations of Iran all the time. So their mind is blown. Oh my God, they fired rockets at some of our installations, despite the fact that we've murdered multiple troops of theirs in multiple airstrikes. The most that you can say is, if this is Iran, this is just a retaliation for what Israel has done. I mean, either way you look at it, either it's a retaliation strike for what Israel has done in murdering Iranian troops, or it's not Iran at all, in which case it's Syria responding to Israel murdering Syrians. Either way you put it, it's retaliation. Israel in turn retaliated again. They retaliated again. So this is fresh airstrikes, and I'll leave it at this. Fresh Israeli missile attack reportedly target Iran bases in Syria. Authorities have told occupants of the Golan Heights to prepare bomb shelters in anticipation for a revenge attack. Isn't it a little weird? They know exactly the place and even the time that the attack is going to take place. This sounds like BS. This sounds like Israel looking for a way to come up with some kind of moral high ground that they don't have. That's what it sounds like. Hey, you guys may need to get into a bomb shelter because they're being attacked. It could be any day. It may even be tomorrow. Oh, there's an attack! There's an attack! There's an attack! We knew it! We knew it! We knew Iran was going to do it! We knew Iran was going to do it! And the media says, hey, Israel said there was an attack. The media, the military said blah, 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 blah. And that's the story. That's the headline. One paper after the next. This is what Iran did. Because Israel told us so. I just find it to be amazing that they take their word like that. Let's keep going. The Syrian government accused Israel on Tuesday of launching fresh missile attacks on an army base in Al-Qaswa area near Damascus, while Western sources indicated that the attack targeted an Iranian military base in Syria. Following reports on social media in Syria at around 10 p.m. local time of explosion in Al-Qaswa, the country's official news agency later confirmed the attack. It said the Syrian air defenses blocked 2 Israeli missiles and destroying them in the area of Al-Qaswa in Damascus suburb. Another Syrian military source said the attack targeted a Syrian army base without incurring casualties. Fox News, however, quoting Western sources, said an Iranian military base in Syria was the target of the attack. Western military sources said the military compound that was hit is located about 10 miles south of Syrian capital Damascus. Video showing the big fireball on social media after the attack. While Israel did not confirm or deny the strikes, a state of alert was reported by its armed forces near the Syrian border. Reuters said the Israeli military had instructed the local authorities in the Israeli-held Golan Heights to unlock and ready bomb shelters after identifying what the military described Tuesday as regular activity on his Iranian forces in Syria. Yeah, and I bet they were wearing an Israeli badge. It also said that Israeli forces are on high alert. I bet they were. In Washington, CNN reported on Tuesday that U.S. defense officials are seeing signs that Iran is preparing to strike Israel possibly from Syria. And again, why on earth would you take anything that the United States and Israel saying in this to be true? Why would any newspaper print anything that the United States and Israel is saying on this to be true? Why? How are you stenographers on something that these people are clearly biased on? I mean, I find it to be fucking amazing. I'm not going to keep this one long. I'm going to put the links at the bottom. By the way, Raina Kalik made the point that this wasn't Iran. This was Syria. Syrian forces that were responding to Israel attacking. If I could find her tweet, I would love to get her on the show. Right here. Israel fired at Syria. The Syrians, not Iranians, fired back. What does an exchange of fire between Israel and Syria have to do with the Iran nuclear deal? What backwards logic is that? She's been talking about this, and as she's been talking about this, I've been following. FYI, Syrian commanders on the ground report that it was the Syrian army and the National Defense Forces that responded to Israeli provocations in the Golan Heights. They said there are no Shia forces in the area, and the reports that Iran fired at Israel are false. They're saying it didn't happen. They're saying it didn't happen. Right here. So I guess all the major media outlets are going to push the Israeli line about Iran firing as Israel without first verifying. Yes! Yes! I was read the same thing. I was like, how are you taking the Israeli line for this hook, line, and sinker without any verification? I mean, come on. That's fucking amazing. Maybe just reprint idea of press releases to save time. You guys are going to help start a war at this rate. God damn it. I hadn't read that part first. Yeah, she's right. She's right. I've looked at multiple sources, multiple stories, multiple reports, and all of them, Iran fires at Israel. And I'm like, how do you know that? Well, the Israeli Defense Force told us so. You guys are fucking idiots. You guys are fucking idiots. I am going to end this. I'm not going to keep this one long. Lori Glenny, we are the terrorists. We are the problem. We are the terrorists. Literally, we are the terrorists. What is Europe going to do? That's what I want to know. What is Europe going to do? Like, is Europe just going to stand by, or is Europe going to say, put its foot down? Is it going to be this weak, no pushback? Because ultimately, if the United States starts putting sanctions on European companies, what is Europe going to do? I'm immensely curious about that. Not just that. If Israel continues provocation and Israel starts a larger conflict in that region of the world, what does Russia do? What does Russia do? Especially if the United States gives signs that it's going to get involved in that conflict, what does Russia do? This is the sign of a larger conflict, a larger war. It is sad and pathetic that some people are not recognizing that this is a sign of a larger war, and they're letting their heritage get in the way of good goddamn sense. They're trying to start a conflict. So I'll leave it at that. Syrian commanders are saying it didn't happen. They're saying that these guys are making it up and this is somewhat of a false flag. Whether it's happened or not, the Western media has completely toed the line, and they've completely ignored any reality associated with this to even try to confirm the story. This is amazing. The Israeli Defense Force says this, and they just go with it. They just go with it. No verification or anything else. Cloud illusion. Jamal, if you want more viewers, make the headline in your video more clearer and exciting. Israel accuses Iranian forces of firing 20 rockets into Israel's stolen land. That's literally what's taking place. I don't know how clearer you can be. I know there are many supporters of Israel, but are we the only ones all in the EU? Yeah, it's amazing. Jenny Lamb, women's march against the Pentagon in October. Be there. Adored Pariah, Trump says that ignoring the groups in America wanting death to Muslims in the Middle East. Kashwari Clyde loser Jamal Thomas should go to HA's breaking news headlines. Well, this is breaking. This is taking place right now. This is what's going on right now. Clyde illusion Jamal, that's pretty good. That is literally what's taking place. Israel accuses Iranian forces of firing. That's literally what's taking place. I could say Israel lies, but creating a bombshell headline, if you're not necessarily being truthful in the headline, is like Hillary Clinton gets convicted. Well, that's a lie. She wasn't getting convicted. She didn't get convicted. She may get convicted in the future, but that's not what's taking place. I don't want to do headlines like that. I'd rather do headlines that are honest. If people don't necessarily click on the headlines because, you know, yeah, I don't want to do lying headlines. I don't want to lie. Lisa Hauserman, Skip, this is going to drive me crazy, so I'm going to see. I know there's several areas to be back. Elephants on Coke. Is it because no one would join their military? They have poorly trained military. Bob Ramirza, put it on your next book, Jamal. Hail McCall, Israel also lied about weapons of mass destruction. Why are they credible? I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. Hail McCall, I have no idea. This is kind of my point. How are these people calling themselves journalists when information comes in and they don't scrutinize the information? They just say, they told us to say this. They told us to say this. So this is what we're telling the public. And it's like, they don't take into account that these people have lied profusely. And not just lied profusely, are literally murdering people. The same military that's out there murdering people and murdering protesters is now giving you information about something else. And your response to this is, okay, well, they said this. Perfectly credible. They know exactly what they're saying. They know what they're saying. Moni G, but really, Jamal, does everyone else denounce Israel? Look, the European nations have been somewhat in solidarity with this idea that Israel has been stealing land. The United States has been so protective of Israel in many of these cases, essentially blocking any resolutions on this front, meaning no action takes place with the standpoint of denouncing Israel. From a United Nations standpoint, the United States is their only backer. Other countries, yeah, they have a particular disposition towards Israel. Yeah, they do. Jews control the media and intelligentsia, Minister Farrakhan. Zox Avox. I think our journalists know deep down that the government would kill them if they don't read it. Jesus Christ. Lori Glenny. We have been in the Middle East since the establishment of Israel, 1945 or so. It was before that, actually, if you're talking about the West. Britain was there even before the First World War, where you have like the signing of the Balfour Document. Britain is promising Arabs one thing and they're promising Jews something else. And now you have both societies that are ready to try to govern themselves. Israel wants land. The hostilities kind of rise up, but then you have World War II, and those hostilities kind of die down while the war is going on. But they start to escalate the moment where you start putting Jews into the country, and you end up with this kind of military occupation of the people who are there in that land. We've partitioned that part of the globe up, going back all the way to World War II. Yeah. Jamal, I live for you. Thank you for keeping us posted. I suspect this will happen to a lot of people. look, I focus on this because I consider this to be a big deal. You look at the trigger points of what took place that take us into World War One. You look at the trigger points of what's taking place in World War Two. You look at the trigger points when things happen and they just drag countries into larger conflicts that those countries don't necessarily want to be in. In this case, the countries want to be in those conflicts, which is kind of the problem. So you can't necessarily trust anything that comes out, but the media does. And it lies to the public. Flagrantly lies to the public. I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, this has gone much longer than I wanted to. Jesus Christ, 30 minutes. Well, anybody who's turning on, they can see the first few minutes to get what's going on. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks everyone. See you guys tomorrow.